It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It is the Take Command Instant Reaction Show. I am Craig Hoffman, and joining me today for his maiden voyage on the Take Command post-game Instant Reaction Show. Not as instant today, the 1 o'clock kick, the 4 o'clock finish, the 7:30-ish start for us. Chris Russell is here. What's up, Chris?
Hello, Craig. How are you? Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. It's good to see you again. Saw you again, of course, on a Friday at the Army-Navy Radio Row, which was great. We both spent a ton of time trying to predict what was going to happen in this game. And then, wow, that was an interesting one. Chris, here's how I'm going to set this up. Do you want to play the good cop or the bad cop?
I'll play the good cop. How about that?
That's so out of character for you. Go right ahead. What's the good cop version of this game for the Commanders? Because I really do feel like there's a good cop version of this game and there's a bad cop version.
Yeah, listen. I mean, I'm probably more aligned with you. There was a lot of bad. Let's acknowledge that. But there were some good. I mean, obviously Terry with touchdowns number 10 and 11. The throws that Jaden had on those two particular plays, obviously the routes and the effort that Terry exuded on both of those plays, that's the number one positives. I think you start with that. The first half defense was great. I think they only allowed, what was it, Craig, 40 some odd yards. I think it was the lowest the Saints had in a half since Jim Haslett was their head coach in the early 2000s.
Your old buddy, your old pal.
Yeah, my old pal, old Has. So there were some positives, and ultimately the positive is that they found a way to win. I'm guessing we probably feel very similar that they are very fortunate to win, and it's as much as it was. You felt good about the Tennessee win, and going into the bye, you kind of feel worse almost in a way, or just the opposite, if you will, even though both were wins.
So I'll even go a step further on the good cop version of this, right? The good cop version is they were up big at halftime, and in the second half, although Spencer Rattler made some plays, the Saints had a couple of drives extended on absolutely bogus third down roughing the passer calls. Jaden missed Terry wide open 3 times for touchdowns, and it is unusual for him to go 0 for 3 in that situation. And they miss more kicks. So if you can just kick the field goal late. And by the way, they also have a play late in the game. They complete a big ball to De'Ami Brown to get a first down. They're going to be inside the 10, and there's a penalty that wipes it out. So the penalties we'll talk about them in the bad cop section, but you are any number, 2 of those 5-8 plays going away, some of which you actually made good plays and the referees took it off of you in the roughing case. The penalty on the De'Ami play was an actual penalty. But you have all these plays that you are that close to a blowout. Again, where you're winning by 10, you're covering the spread. Craig would have been happy about that because he perhaps picked up the 7.5, but alas, you can't win them all. And thus, I think that there is, from a performance standpoint, you could write a good script. I also think that the bad cop version is also very real, which is, again, the defense was not as good in the second half as the first, which has been consistent whether there's a quarterback change or not. There is an inconsistency to the offensive performance where they hit these lulls, they hit these drags, and a lot of that is self-imposed by penalties where you're not actually getting stopped, and that's really frustrating. And you shouldn't have to get a big play on a 2-point conversion. There's also somewhere in between the good cop and the bad cop is the actual cop / referees saving the Saints 3 seconds. Just feels like we should mention it. But I think that that's the hard thing, and why I think I definitely can't wait to watch the tape of this performance and see how I feel after it when Logan and I get back here on Tuesday, Chris, is because I think all of those things are true. And that's kind of, in all honesty, we've been spoiled at times this year because this team has won in blowouts in multiple games. But this is often how it goes in the National Football League, even for the good teams.
And I agree with a lot of your sentiment that you just outlaid there. I mean, we can get into the officiating and certainly, if not bad calls, they were ticky-tack calls at the very minimum. The 2 clock errors, Craig. There was not 1 clock error. There was 2 because on the first miss, if you will, by Greg Joseph, which doesn't count as a miss. I mean, they butchered that by 5 seconds. I've never seen anything as egregious as that. And then we almost got something as egregious under 10 seconds left that should have essentially led to the Saints not being able to be in position to score that touchdown that put them in position to go for 2 as as the game expired. Just horrendous across the board. The one thing that's interesting, and I'll be really curious to see what you think here because I haven't talked to you about it. There is no doubt Jaden missed, and just by a sliver on Terry twice. I thought the middle one. I thought Terry slowed up just a little bit on his route, and maybe that's what led to.
Well, I think you're talking about the one down the right sideline, right?
Yeah.
So on that play, I don't think Terry's got to go. I think he's like running the route as designed, and realizes, holy crap, there's nobody there. Like, we're in scramble drill mode. I'm just going to go. And I think that's what happened. It was interesting, too, because the 3 throws wind up being a little bit related. The first 2, Jaden uncharacteristically does not put air under them. They're line drives relative to the distance. And normally Jaden's tremendous at putting the ball in the air. And the reason that's so important, like, yes, it looks really pretty. But the reason the trajectory is so important is if it's a higher trajectory, and Chris, I know you know this, but just kind of laying it out in layman's terms for the audience, is because if the ball's in the air longer, the receiver has more time to adjust. If you're going to dot somebody on a rope 40 yards down the field, it has to be perfect. If you put air under it, the receiver has a chance to speed up, slow down, change their track, whatever. And Jaden normally is tremendous at that. First 2, he didn't. And then he winds up underthrowing the third one a little bit, where he puts too much air under it. The defender gets back in. I thought it was PI, but it was way close. Like, that wasn't an egregious miss like some of the other calls that we've talked about. But I did think he got there a little early. But, like, if Jaden just leads Terry out there, then it's a walk-in touchdown, and it doesn't really matter. So I thought that, like, Jaden had an interesting game to me, Chris. And I think that some of the throws he makes, like, he got to save them in the first half. Their offense was super disjointed. Sometimes I come out of games not liking the play calling. I go back and watch it on film. I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like, so I'm going to reserve judgment and not make a fool out of myself on Tuesday preemptively. But I did think they just should have run the ball more in some certain situations and overall because the Saints run defense was going bad. But in the first half, Jaden just ripped some balls on third down and they survive. In the second half, a little bit more inconsistent from Jaden, which is natural. He's a human. And you see what happens to the offense. So I feel like Jaden had a really interesting day in that regard.
Yeah, I'm with you. I definitely think they should have run the ball more. I remember there was a 5-yard run that Brian Robbins had, I think, on the second drive where he kind of bounced it to the left when penetration came. And I was like, okay, it's going to be one of those days, especially without Biotis, where they're really going to have to make things work and maybe some smoke and mirrors more than usual in the run game, even though the Saints came in struggling. I had said all week, hey, look, since Darren Rizzi took over, they're only allowing 16 points a game. They hadn't played, a bunch of offensive juggernauts outside of one in the Rams, but they even did a pretty good job against the Rams, but they had still been giving up rushing yards. They had a big rushing yard allowed day to Atlanta. The Rams had some success in that game, but the point total had been down. So I was confused kind of coming in as to whether or not they would have success. They did not, but they also, I think we can admit this, that they did not have tremendous success, but they also did not do a good enough job trying. And I wonder, it's just me, wonder how much of the game plan kind of was changed a little bit when Biotis couldn't play.
Yeah, no, I thought about that. And, when we talk about the good cop, bad cop side of this game, like, I do think the offense got worse when Ertz went out. Biotis is a game time, all of a sudden scratch. The defense, Chin missed the last 7.5 minutes. Like, that would have been nice to have on that final drive. And so there are some things that you have to adapt to, but like, that's also the NFL. And I think that, I see a lot of the comments as we're doing this live. And if you're listening to this later on the podcast, you can join us live on YouTube for the instant reaction shows. Logan and I do them for home games from the stadium and obviously for road games here. We try to go after the late games. So I went back and watched some of the game. Or actually, I went back and watched the full condensed game. And at least 4 of the 8 sacks I can relate to either Tyler Biotis not being there, or they're actually like -1 scrambles where Jaden vacates the pocket, gets out. Now, I don't know why he's having to vacate the pocket because I don't have the all 22, but it's like, okay, well, that was a sack technically, but he runs out of bounds for -1. Like, I'm barely if I'm the O-line coach and I'm doing my own internal statistics, I don't know that I count that necessarily as a sack. There's two others in the first half alone that are on a 3rd and 9, one of which I think the 3rd and 9, but it might have been the 3rd and 16, are after a play that it's a good play that's wiped away by a penalty. And so the idea that like the offensive line had a terrible game because they gave up 8 sacks, I don't think tells the entire story. I think that there were some potential route issues. I think there's some Jaden holding the ball issues. There's certainly some Jaden pocket movement issues on a couple of them. He steps into sacks. And so I'm not blanket saying that the O-line had no problems. And I think especially on the 3rd and longs, where the Saints are bringing these more complex pressure packages, that is where the no Biotish kills you, because this is the guy that sets your protections. And not only are you getting his backup, you're getting his backup with no reps. This wasn't like he got hurt last week and then Michael Dieter practiced all week. So that is really, really tough for an offensive line. They did a good job for the first half of mostly staying out of those situations. When they got in them, they got really hurt by those situations. And I will also say, like, I got to go back and watch it again, and I'm going to keep an extra eye on right tackle. But to the people that are just like, how could you just start Andrew Wiley over Cornelius Lucas? See, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, stop talking. You'll sound smarter. I promise. This was not like an Andrew Wiley bomb scare nightmare game. It just wasn't. Maybe there's a couple of plays that when I go back and watch it on tape, I'll feel a little differently about that. But there was nothing that like screamed on tape, oh my God, right tackle was all of a sudden the issue. Like, starting center missing was the issue. Jaden Daniels not always seeing the field great was an issue. And that is something that I think we know. And Chris, to bring this back to your wheelhouse, sometimes that's why you got to run the ball a little bit more. Like, let's take some of those decisions off the plate, deleverage the quarterback. And I think had they just like banged their head a little bit more against the wall, that wall might have broken.
So, and just to kind of like finish that point, we started that with talking about Biotish and maybe that hurting the running game, but it absolutely hurt the pass protection as well. And maybe some of the step up stuff, like I think of the one sack that Chase Young had. I think it was his first of the 2 where he kind of got Jaden from behind as he stepped up through the middle of the line and all of that. Listen, here's one thing that's not going to be a popular sentiment. Give the Saints defensive line some credit. That is the strength of their team, right? Cam Jordan has been a good pass rusher for a long time. Chase, I mean, I don't remember as vicious of a chop move that he had on Brandon Coleman, I think for the first sack to free, or maybe it was the second of his 2 sack, one of them. And I don't remember it being that good. So give the Saints a little bit of credit too. But the one thing, and it sounds like you agree with this, I did think Jaden was leaving a little bit too early. I think there was a lot. Some of that seemed by design. Some of that seemed by necessity. And I go back to the Dallas game, Craig. I thought Jaden left the pocket often early. And some of it, again, was because of pressure and you're trying to get away and you're trying to flush away. But sometimes I think he's a little antsy, and maybe I'm seeing it wrong. Man, you watch much more tape than I ever will. You and Logan are on top of this. But to me, that's what it felt like at times today.
Yeah, I think this is where I have to remember, or we all have to remember, that Jaden's a young player, and there's just things that are going to happen to him because he's a rookie in the NFL, and it happens to Lamar. It happens to everybody. Every good quarterback, every great quarterback has these moments where every snap is not going to be perfect. And sometimes, we're later in a season, teams are trying some stuff. Maybe they've got a little bit of tape and saying, hey, this coverage kind of messes him up. And if you get in an obvious passing situation, is he confused by the coverage and then just going, screw this, I'm just going to run? And the thing is, sometimes that works out. And so it's also hard to go like, hey, this is the perfect amount. Like, sure, afterwards, it'd be like, oh, should have done that, should have done this. But it's hard in that moment. And so I think, yes, there are times he's leaving early that is frustrating. I think there are also times where the clock goes off and he goes to scramble, and it's like, no, man, when the clock goes off, just hit your check down. And that is something that he can do, I think, more consistently. And by the way, I think he's doing it more often. There's one play today where he kind of does this jump pass to Brian Robinson where he's got to jump over pressure or jump over an outstretched hands to get the ball off and jump over some pressure in his face. But he didn't really check the ball down much earlier in the year. He just would run. And again, sometimes that worked out. But from a process standpoint, like learning to get to your check down, and I think also learning to get to your check down early where they have a little bit more space, like that's kind of a pro quarterback move. Something that a guy, I know he was captain check down, but like that Alex Smith was great at was like, I'm not going to mess around with my third read. It's probably not going to be open. I'm just going to hit my check down now, like 1-2 check down. Now it's a running back who's in a ton of space and he can go make a play. So I think that there's still growth. There's still plenty to do. I think the bigger decision-making thing that I am really looking forward to watching on tape is I think Jaden made some bad decisions in the zone read game today. And that's part of the running issue is like, yeah, he wound up running the ball a lot and had some good ones, but he also like, there's one where he has a tackle for loss and like Jeremy McNichols walks in for a touchdown. And you're just like, brah, come on. Like we just saw him go out the other side of the line. Like they faked the camera guy out. He was walking in. And so there's some of those too. And it's a balance of how much do you put on Jaden's plate, how much do you take off of it, how much do you rely on your O-line. And the other thing too, like, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but just to make one more quick point on the running game stuff and, the game plan and how it changes. You mentioned the Biotish stuff. When Ertz goes down, you lose all your 13 personnel. And there's some snaps early in that game where they're in 13 personnel with all 3 tight ends on the field. You lose that the second Zach goes out. So not only are you without one of your main weapons and one of your first down machines, but you lose a package of plays. And so there's just things that you have to adapt to. I think they didn't do a great job of adapting to all of that. And I think that's, when Dan Quinn talks about lessons, like that's one of the lessons I think he and Cliff and the staff offensively are going to take out of this game.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way as you on the zone read stuff. I mean, but I think that's been a thing throughout the year where you've seen, he could have made a better decision here, could have made, and again, some of that is rookie, some of that is just, again, the speed of the game, what have you, and maybe trying to do a little bit too much. There was something like early in the game that I thought kind of, I don't know, annoyed me might be strong, but like on one of the sacks he had, I think it was Jamison Crowder wide open in the left flat and he didn't see him. And it looked like he saw him at first, but then it closed quickly and maybe it just closed too quickly. I don't know. There were some things that Jaden definitely did. And I, like you, looking forward to kind of going back and slowing it down and kind of saying, okay, what was he maybe thinking here and how was he processing it? I mean, overall, I think you said it perfectly. There was a lot to like. There was some not to like. There was some certainly that you could learn from and get better. I don't know if Cliff Kingsbury did a good enough job helping him. Certainly Terry was amazing, with the exception of maybe the two of them not being able to make that one final stamp play. And you're right. Maybe our perspective would be completely different if they make one or two of those plays, or if the Diami play is not called back on a penalty. I think that was Allegretti, if not mistaken, or if there was one other play that kind of could have gone their way that maybe would have swung the game. And I'm struggling in my mind.
They make the field goal.
Well,
they're up by 10.
So here's my question on that. I didn't like that call. I don't trust Greg Joseph. I was worried about Greg Joseph from the minute they signed him, and I thought, obviously I thought there was a decent chance he could kick today. Not that I trust Zane Gonzalez, but I don't like Greg Joseph. Very talented, got a good leg. I understand. But
like, what were their other options?
Well, the other option was to punt, which I know a lot of people wouldn't like, but try and make a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback go, if you can, 85, 90 yards. I think it was 4th and 16, if memory serves me correct.
That's correct. That's what I was just scrolling for, yeah.
What I don't like, Craig, about that is, you have a talented but a inconsistent, unreliable throughout his career kicker. I know somebody who was with him in Minnesota, and That's why he's not in Minnesota anymore because of how inconsistent he is, right? And I understand you're indoors. I understand it's not popular or sexy to punt. I know you can't go for it in that spot. I got it. But what I don't like about that decision, and I thought it in the moment, and I said, again, since Friday, I don't trust this guy at all in any way, shape, or form. Is not only does he, if he misses it, you don't get the points, but you also give them a free 7 yards on the spot. So they take over
the
at
7 yards,
at the 44.
Yeah, it's where the 7 yards is, right? Like when I was doing the condensed game, I was like, wait, how did they get to midfield? Oh, right.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't actually thought of that because the other thing it does is, it probably kills about 10 seconds a clock. Like just bomb it high in the air, make sure that it's not a touchback, and live with the result. It's somewhere between 6 and 10 seconds. If they fair catch it, it's probably closer to 6. If it bounces and rolls, it's probably 10. And then they have to go 90 yards. I actually don't hate that. Like normally I'm very anti-punt. I think in general, like my one big gripe, speaking of, anti-kick in general, like my one big gripe with Quinn, it is my only big gripe with Dan, is he talks about being bold. He talks about being aggressive. And in 90% of ways, he is. I want more Dan Campbell in him. And I'm not saying you have to go full Dan Campbell because no one should go full Dan Campbell. There's not enough caffeine in the world for everyone to go full Dan Campbell.
You got it on the 4th and 1 at the 45, though, at your own.
But like that's the thing,
45.
They got it because of course they did, because Jaden's a cheat code on 4th and 1.
Right.
And so, like for instance, the first field goal that Joseph hits, 23 yards. If the field goal is going to be less than 30 yards, don't kick it. Like full stop, unless it is a game winner with 3 seconds remaining, and there will be no further plays, and you are in a tie game or a 1-point game. And this will be the thing that wins you the football game. If the field goal distance starts with a 2, never kick it, ever. Because the worst thing that happens, I guess the worst thing that happens is you have a fluky botch snap or a block and it goes the other way. Outside of something like that, which can happen anywhere, the worst thing that happens is you don't get it, and then they have to go 90 yards. Okay, fine, whatever. If that's the case, fine. But the best thing that happens is you score a touchdown. And often in those situations, like it's hard, they've already stopped you 3 times. They're really going to stop you 4 if it's 4th and goal. So like those kinds of things just drive me bananas. And so I do think some of the game management at times, I understand the way they do it. And it's funny because some of my biggest gripes have come in games that they've ultimately won. And then it's very easy to be like, but they made the right decision because they won. And it's like, a counterfactual could be that they could have won easier. The Giants game, they could have won easier. This game, they perhaps could have won easier if they are more aggressive in, let's call it the 10-yard line and in the low red zone on 4th down and stop kicking 20-plus yard or, minus 30-yard field goals.
I wonder if no, it's okay. It's your show. I wonder if they went for that field goal though in that spot. And I, by the way, agree with you. But I wonder if they went with that because Cam Jordan had sacked Jaden on the previous play, which was I think a 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
So I wonder if
yeah. No, it would have wound up being like you have to get like 6 yards instead of 2.
Right.
Okay. Fine. Whatever. I'm still okay. Let's say it's an incompletion. They have to go 94 yards with Jake Haener at that point of the game. Fine. They're probably going to go 3 and out. Maybe they get 1 first down. You get great field position. Go at it again. Score a touchdown. Because that's the thing is like instead of field goal good and then you give them regular field position, like you might wind up scoring a touchdown the next drive even if you don't get it and coming out net +7 as opposed to coming out 3 and then whatever they get on the ensuing drive.
Well, that kind of then bleeds back into what I was talking about with the 54-yard field goal miss, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Like if you punt that ball and maybe you even take a 5-yard delay of game penalty, and now we've seen head coaches kind of counter that by declining it, whatever. If you punt that ball and if Tress does his thing and the punt coverage does his thing, or he forces a fair catch, say it's inside the 10, either you're making them drive 90-ish yards, or even if maybe they return it, slight return or fair catch it, and then you make a defensive stop, right? Because they've got to probably string together a number of plays. Then you get the ball like you said, in better field position the next offensive series around, and it makes it easier then to potentially score. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's easy to criticize moves
I mean, they make here's the other thing. Like Greg Joseph, it's a 40 whatever yard field goal. You're a professional kicker. Make the field goal, and then and I hate being that guy because like at the end of the day, kicking is really hard. Most people watching right now, including the two yahoos yapping, could not get the ball on a 43-yard field goal inside the 10. Like, that's a far kick for regular humans. He's not a regular human. He's a professional kicker. You get it. You're up 10. The game is over. So I get that too. All right, real quick, Chris, to wrap things up. The defense. Amazing first half. Second half, yikes. The good news, Marshawn Lattimore seems to be great because they didn't even throw at him. That was very helpful. But I mean, I kind of, on some level, I have to give credit to Spencer Rattler because that dude came in and was like making cojones grandes throws. I don't know what I'm allowed to. It's YouTube. I can say whatever I want. Big time throws. PFF will grade them as big time throws. But also, like, hey, Jeremy Chin, one of those is right in front of you. Pick it off. Frankie Luvu has a ball that hits him in the hand. You got to pick it off. And it kind of does go to something that Joe Witt is talking about, which is the ball production is there. I think Joe said on Thursday that they had, like, in the last 3 weeks, 12 balls hit them in the hands. We'll add a couple more that either did or should have. They have them one from Mikey, but, like, if they could just make literally one or two plays, completely different ball game. Instead, they let things go. And yes, I will, before Chris goes, before I forget, it feels like Benjamin St. Juste played one defensive snap, picked up a stupid penalty on a third down and extended a drive. That can't happen. That's bad. There, I've criticized Benjamin St. Juste. Everyone in the comments goes nuts.
I think clearly that penalty hurt. There's no doubt. The two, I don't want to call them phantom calls, but certainly very, 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 very shaky, iffy calls, bad calls, whatever you want to call them, certainly hurt. I thought they missed a call on Johnny Newton. Right before one of the roughing the passer penalties, he was yanked down by the left guard.
On the one in the end zone, Luvu's held in the end zone. Yes. That's a safety.
Yeah. Well, that and again, the play that I was talking about with Johnny Newton, he's yanked down. He gets back up. He chases. I think it was he chased. Who was the back?
Rattler?
Rattler at that point, right? Gets some heat on him, and then Rattler gets rid of it, makes a completion, and Johnny chases that down and makes basically the tackle. And I think that was on a second down, if memory serves me correct. Like, so there was a bunch of officiating things. I think we've acknowledged that, and certainly a bunch of them did not go the way of the Commanders. When you're talking about overall defensive efficiency, I think one play that stood out in my mind, and it was before the great Kamara touchdown, was a 3rd and 10. They allowed a 12-yard, I think it was an in-cutting route on 3rd and 10, and I just felt like, for whatever reason in the moment, and I think I even mentioned it on X, I said, God, that's not a great sign. Like, you don't want to give a team life that's absolutely dead. And sure as you know what, they scored the trick play touchdown after that. And then things sort of settled down a little bit. And then they got going again late in the game. And maybe that was because of Chin's injury, as you mentioned. The other thing, real quickly, that I'll say is maybe some of those penalties that were called that, again, not great calls, maybe that slows you down mentally in terms of your pass rush and getting off and closing, and maybe you're a little bit hesitant, I guess, maybe, for lack of a better term. I don't know. I don't know the psyche of what guys are thinking when penalties start getting called and you're like, what the hell do I do? Maybe it slows you down mentally by just a quarter step or a half step.
Maybe. I think at the end of the day, like, if I'm Joe, we gave up 19 points. You know, say what you want about the decision to go for 2 at the end, which, by the way, I like the decision for Rizzi to do that. Just like try to do it, try to end it here. Because I don't feel real confident that we can get another stop in overtime. But that's for the Saints people to discuss. But, give up 19, 20 points, but they're all in the second half. Like, that's not good. You have a shutout at halftime. Like, that's just rough. And you can't live that way, especially when, let me actually pull this up real quick. I got the box score in front of me. Team stats, you had 74 plays run by your offense. You had 40 minutes and 50 seconds time of possession by your offense. This was not an issue where your offense hung you out to dry like some of the other second halves, right? Like, yes, the offense in the second half was not very good. They could have scored more points and put the game away, where you regressing in the second half does not matter as much. This is on the defense. The defensive second half performance is 100% on the defense. You were only on the field for 20 minutes of the entire game. You've got to simply play better. You have to find, and this goes back to something that Dan has preached time and time again. You have to finish. And they have finished Friday, and they do the whole thing. But I will say, Chris, I just think sometimes some of this stuff that we're talking about, like when they get better players, this stuff will be fixed. Like when you have better players, they actually catch the ball. When you have, better pass rushers, they finish the sack instead of letting Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener spin out of it. These are the things where they're getting the most out of talent they have in a lot of ways. They just have to make plays. Better players make plays. And right now, they're in year one of a rebuild and are still 9-5. It is their best start through 14 games since 1992. They've secured their first winning season since 2016. They have their first 9-win season since 2015. Like, all in all, things are pretty good, even if that game was frustrating 17 ways from Sunday. Like, at the end of the day, like, they won. And they've got like an 85% chance of making the playoffs, even though everything else they needed to happen today to boost that percentage didn't really happen. All the wrong teams won. But at the end of the day, like, they're in great shape. And I think the Philly game next week is going to be a hell of a lot of fun.
One thing that we probably haven't discussed maybe enough is they got a little bit of a break in the second half, and maybe it makes the defensive, what you're talking about, worse. Is Kamara missed a good deal of that second half after the circus touchdown catch. He gets banged up, and he's not. And the backup running back, I forgot his name, Craig. Maybe you remember it off the. But
I don't. But I have a box score in front of me, so I can look it up.
Well, he gave them a little pop and sizzle right after the Kamara injury.
Yeah,
and then
Kendre Miller.
There you go. And again, maybe they would have lost this game if Kamara stays healthy, right? And they were already short Olave and was it Shakir?
Yeah.
And
Shaheed.
Shaheed, there you go. And Taysom Hill. They would have lost this game maybe those guys were already out, but if Kamara stays in, maybe they lose this game. And look, the way it worked out, I mean, it's easy to say that, but that kind of feeds into some of those problems that you were talking about. Now, I do wonder, again, if they didn't get jobbed on a couple of these calls, which I think we all agree they probably got jobbed on a couple of these calls,
sure,
how different the perspective would be as we're talking.
Like, that's I'm frustrated. Chris, I don't know how often you listen to this or I know you sometimes listen to the radio show when you're driving home. My beef with officiating this year has not been like the Commanders are getting screwed. It's that it's bad, and I'm tired of it being bad, and no matter who it screws. And like, yes, if you're Joe Witt, there's 3/4 of this game where you're like, guys, great job. Do it again next week. And if we play the exact same way, nothing bad happens, because they're not going to call that BS roughing call. But that's life in the league. You have to then go make the next play. And defense is really hard, because you can be really good on 2 downs, give up a 3rd down, rinky-dink penalty, or a 10-yard in, a guy slips a tackle, whatever, and like 1st down, okay, well, damn, we're successful 2/3 of the time. That's not good enough. And so, yeah, it's hard. Playing defense is hard in the NFL. That said, there's plays to be made, and you have to just make them. And I think that's the thing that's frustrating, probably, if you're Witt and Quinn, and you're so used to creating turnovers at the rate that you do, is you literally have balls hit guys in the hands, and you just need to catch them. And so if they do that, I think you're fine. But it's gonna be very interesting tape to watch. And so we'll do that tomorrow. Then we'll talk about it Tuesday morning. Logan and I will be back then. If you want more from me or more from Chris between now and then, they give us 3 hours apiece on the radio. I mean, what a terrible idea. I mean, what a fantastic idea that is. Chris is on the Team 980, 1 to 4 every single day. Hands the baton to me. I run the anchor leg for us, 4 to 7 there on the Team 980, and of course the free Odyssey app. My show also streams live on YouTube here at the Team 980. And if you miss any part of Chris's show that you'd like to check out, or mine, you just search in your favorite podcast app for the name of our shows, The Chris Russell Show, The Hoffman Show, and you can check it out there. Chris, anything else as we say goodbye?
No, I would say this, and I already see some of the comments about us being too negative. Guess what? Be prepared for that this week. Nobody's going to love this result. the result you accept. You won the game. You did enough right, but just because you win does not mean everything is perfect and everything is great and everything is grand, and we're just not going to talk about the things that they didn't do well enough. That's not the way this works. That's not the way you know this, Craig. You do Tell the Truth Monday on the radio. Well, Dan Quinn and the boys do it Tell the Truth in the building Monday, and they'll tell the truth probably Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and in between coaches on Tuesday. And they know they've got a lot to fix and a lot to improve on. It's not just, hey, we won the game, don't look here.
Yeah, for sure. But telling the truth also means, like, actually, I went back and watched that thing. That was pretty good. Great job. Marshawn Lattimore, man, they didn't throw at you. There's a reason. Like, we watched the tape. It was never open. Like, so we'll get into it all. That's the beauty of the space we have on the radio. That's the beauty, obviously, of what we're trying to do here on Take Command. So we appreciate everyone checking us out. Logan and I'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you've made it this far, hit the subscribe button. Also hit the like button on this video, but hit the subscribe button. You're clearly you like the Harris Yap. All right, that's it. That's all. See ya. Goodbye.